The way Vivek articulates this is that our immigration system is deeply dishonest. Like, we don't acknowledge some of the things you just said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he wants to make it honest. So if we don't do mass deportation, at least you have to be really honest about the living conditions of illegal immigrants, about basically mistreatment of them.
Yes, it's true. I mean, if you support mass illegal migration, you're basically supporting tens of millions who are living lives as second-class citizens. That's not fair to them. I also think it's deeply paternalistic. So there's this idea that America has so ruined these Central American countries that they have no agency whatsoever and they can never turn things around. What does that say about our confidence in them? One of the things they always say, they're law abiding, they're great people and all that. I agree. Okay. By and large, I'm not saying these are bad people, but I am saying, like, if they're not bad and they're law abiding and they're citizens and thoughtful and all that, they can fix their own countries. And they did in El Salvador. That's the perfect example. Look at the dramatic drop in their crime rate. Bukele is one of the most popular leaders in all of South America. That is proof positive that you can change things around despite perhaps a legacy of U.S. intervention. So, to just say this idea that, because it's America's fault that they're screwed up, it takes agency away from them. Another really key part of this dishonesty, this really gets to Springfield and the whole Haitian thing, because everybody, beyond the eating cats and dogs, everybody does not even acknowledge, because when they're like, the Haitians are here legally, they need to actually think about the program. The program is called TPS, so let me explain that. TPS is called Temporary Protected Status. Note, what's the first word in that? Temporary. What does that mean? TPS was developed under a regime in which, let's say that there was a catastrophic, I think this is a real example. I think there was like a volcano or an earthquake or something, where people were granted TPS to come to the United States. And the idea was they were going to go back after it was safe. They just never went back. There are children born in the United States today who are literally who are adults, who are the descendants of people who are still living in the U.S. under TPS. That's a perfect example of what Vivek says is dishonest. You can't mass de facto legalize people by saying that they're here temporarily because of a program or because of something that happened in their home country, when the reality is that for all intents and purposes, we are acknowledging them as full legal migrants. So, even the term migrant to these Haitians in Springfield makes no sense, because they're supposed to be here under TPS. That's not migrant implies permanency. So the language is all dishonest. And people don't want to tell you about the things I just said about chain migration. The vast majority of Americans don't even know how the immigration system works. They don't understand what I just said about TPS. They don't really understand the insanity of asylum law, where you can just literally throw up your hands and say, I fear for my life, and you get to live here for 4 or 5 years before your court date even happens. And, by that time, get a work permit or whatever. You can, get housing, like you just said, in substandard conditions, and you can kind of just play the game and wait before a deportation order comes. And even if it does, you never have to leave, because there's no ICE agent or whatever who's going to enforce it. So the whole system is nuts right now. And we need complete systematic reform that burns it all to the ground.
That said, sort of the image and the reality of a child being separated from their parents seems deeply un-American, right?
Well, I mean, look, it gets okay. So, I'm not going to defend it, but I'll just put it this way.
Do you hate children?
Yeah, see, this is what I mean. Do you think twice whenever you see a drug addict who's put in prison and their child is put in protective services? Nobody in America thinks twice about that, right? Right. So, I mean, well, that's kind of screwed up. Well, we should think about, why did we come to that conclusion? The conclusion is that these adults willingly broke the law and pursued a path of life, which put them on a trajectory where the state had to come in and determine that you are not allowed to be a parent, basically, to this child while you serve your debt to society. Now, child separation was very different. Child separation was also a product of extremely strange circumstances in U.S. immigration law, where basically at the time, the reason why it was happening was because there was no way to prosecute people for illegal entry without child separation. Because previous doctrine, I believe it's called the Flores Doctrine, it's some asylum law. People have to go check my work on this. But basically, the whole reason this evolved as a legal regime was because people figured out that if you bring a kid with you, because of the so-called Flores doctrine or whatever, that you couldn't be prosecuted for illegal entry. So it was a de facto way of breaking the law. And in fact, a lot of people were bringing children here who weren't even theirs, they weren't even related to or couldn't even, prove it, were bringing them to get around the prosecution for illegal entry. So I'm not defending child separation. I think it was horrible or whatever. But, if I give you the context, it does seem like a very tricky problem in terms of, do we enforce the law or not? How are we able to do that? And the solution, honestly, is what Donald Trump did was remain in Mexico and then pursue a complete rewrite of the way that we have U.S. asylum law applied and of asylum adjudication and really just about enforcing our actual laws. So when I try to explain to people is the immigration system right now is a patchwork of this deeply dishonest, such a great word, deeply dishonest system in which you use the system and set it up in such ways that illegal immigration is actually one of the easiest things to do to accomplish immigration to the United States. That is wrong. My parents had to apply. It wasn't easy. Do you know in India there's a temple called the Visa Temple where you walk 108 times around it, which is like a lucky number. And if you do it when you're applying for a visa to the United States, all right? It costs a lot of money and it's hard. People get rejected all the time. There's billions of people across the world who would love to be able to come here. And many of them want to do so legally and they should have to go through a process. The current way it works is it's easier to get here illegally than it is legally. I think that's fundamentally right. It's also unfair to people like us whose parents did come here legally.